Hi, everybody, and welcome to the DogCo Secrets Podcast. My name is Michelle Kline. I am your host. I am also the founder of DogCo Launch, where pet care companies come to grow and scale. And we are all the way in on our scaling series for pet care companies, where I am breaking down different stages of growth for pet care companies, where you can expect to hit like most common bottlenecks depending on your revenue size, on your team size, and strategies to get through those bottlenecks and to move forward. It's a series that I've been getting a lot of good feedback on, so we're just going to keep going with that. And today we are going to talk about the window of time when companies are scaling from 300,000 to about 500,000. Up until now, I have been breaking down the scaling phases by $100,000 chunks, and these are approximate numbers. I've really tried to emphasize that in every episode, because as we are working through this series, you're going to hit different pain points at slightly different times. So there's a little bit of nuance to this, but generally these are key points in the scaling journey of your pet care business where I do see patterns, I do see themes. And that is the goal of what we are focusing on, is identifying what those are and giving you the pathway to get through them. So I wanted to speak first to kind of why I'm doing a $200,000 chunk instead of a $100,000 chunk like I have been. So I have found that between 3 and 500,000, you're really going to hit a lot of the same issues in this whole window of scaling revenue. I have, as of yet, reserved the right to change my mind or to get more data or, to take this a different direction. But as of now, with all the research I've been doing, so I've been pulling, data and themes and my own observations from about 200 companies in the pet care industry and building out just what I see. And so far, I haven't really seen a huge distinction between 300 and 400 and 400 and 500. This just tends to be a season of growth. And so, we're just going to get into it today. Wanted to take us back last week to kind of start us where we ended, which was the 200 to 300,000 window of time in your business. I call this the window of have to get help, where somewhere between that $200,000, $300,000 mark, typically two things happen in a business at that size from what I have seen. We get enough revenue in the system that as long as your numbers are set up well or well-ish, and not that we have to be perfect, but they're set up to be kind of healthy margins allocated to labor, healthy margins allocated to profit, there tends to be a little bit more wiggle room for companies that starts to open up here. The owner is able to start to look at reinvesting in the business a little bit more, maybe getting help. And you also hit a certain level of volume where it becomes, from my experience, it starts to get kind of non-optional that you bring in more help and resources into the business. I have seen some owners push way past that line before they bring in help. Typically, they are really feeling it by the time they do. At around this point, and you probably have felt like you needed it before this point, but around this point, it kind of becomes like if we don't start getting more help around the business administratively, it actually becomes the constraint to the growth. In this $200,000 to $300,000 season, it can be really difficult because every area equally needs time and attention. And it's like, where do I put these resources? So last week, I made the recommendation that you first start with investing in a bookkeeper. I brought in a bookkeeper, I think at about 200,000, and I was really feeling the need for it, like the lack of financial clarity, the lack of knowing what my numbers were. So honestly, if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm only at 100,000, I don't need that yet. As an example for you, I had a bookkeeper lined up for DogCo before I even started making money. So that's kind of a mindset shift there. But you can maybe get by to 200,000 a year before you have to have one. So I recommend investing in a bookkeeping relationship. And then I also recommend starting to put people in place on your team who can do the in the field training for new hires. They're not necessarily doing your hiring. They're not necessarily doing scheduling or other pieces of the training process, but they are able to physically do the training in the field for a new hire. That's going to have one of the highest ROI trades you can have on your time as the owner is training new hires. I also talked about focusing on developing out some SOPs and structure. You need to have that if people are going to train for you. And then also focusing on consistency and lead flow. So prior to this revenue point, you maybe have these like big kind of spurts in leads. There might be a scramble of like, oh my God, now I'm so short staffed. So we pull back on all of our marketing. And then we kind of end up in this like bad seesaw of like trying to get leads, trying to stop getting leads. And I really recommend we're looking at how can I even out in this window and get just more consistent leads coming in over a course of time that I'm starting to learn how to match my hiring cadence to. Which brings us to 300,000 to 500,000. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of what I see typically happen for companies in this window. I will then talk about biggest risks I see that will keep you stuck in this window or stuck like not accelerating into higher revenue levels. And then talk about some solutions to get through those bottlenecks, to avoid some of those risks, and to continue scaling. If you're a pet care business that wants to level up, then this is for you. The DogCo Business Summit is in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, September 26th to the 28th. We still have tickets available, and we just announced that we are going digital. So you can get your in-person ticket or your digital ticket at dogcosummit.com. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about in this 300,000 to 500,000 window, I made the suggestion in the 200 to 300,000 that you very specifically reallocate some of that admin resource into a bookkeeper and into a trainer. Now, what I see most companies do, and there is no shame. If I'm about to speak to you on a spiritual level, there is no shame. We have all done something like this. Rather than have that level of definition and clarity, instead, they find someone that can handle administrative work on their team, who they perceive to be talented, who they like working with, and just kind of bring them on as like an all hands on deck. It's like, you are here to help. You are just a helper. That is your official, unofficial role. They kind of end up being a little bit of everything to the business, depending on who this is, the size of the business, the level of chaos that is. That may work for a season. There's also a pretty big risk of turnover and key man risk with a position like that. Turnover because they just never had enough clarity, so they end up leaving. And then key man risk, meaning if they are successful in that type of unstructured role, there's a big risk that a lot of the business kind of gets built around them, built around their capabilities, never gets truly structured, and then they leave and the business is kind of back in the same position that it was before. That is still a risk in 300 to 500,000. I have found it's not uncommon that companies come into this window of revenue with 1 to maybe 5 part-time admin that are kind of just all doing everything. It's starting to get chaotic. It's not sustainable with the volume. It can lead to a really high amount of errors because everybody's hand is in the pot. Everybody's trying to handle issues. And it can also lead to a lot of burnout on your team because nobody really knows who's doing what. So they kind of always feel on, especially from an admin level. It's a little more clear on the team member side because you either have visits or you don't. From the admin side, it's kind of like, y'all know this, the client communication comes in all hours of the night and day. It's not uncommon that a company, especially on the earlier window of this range, just kind of has everybody doing everything. There's not a lot of structure, and it's starting to create chaos, frustration, burnout, turnover, all the things we don't want. So that's a big risk. There's this huge need of structure to keep growing, and it can be really healthy in this season for the business to start to kind of carve out what is everyone doing and to start to specialize people more. Now, hear me. I am actually a huge fan of having a lot of people cross-trained in the same role across your business, so that as you have turnover, you're never left with huge holes. Like when I had my pet care business, I never wanted just one person that knew how to train. I never wanted just one person that knew how to run the daily manager role for the day. I wanted multiple people so that I had flexibility as people changed their hours or gave notice or whatever it was as life happened. However, I am a clear advocate that there is always a single clear owner of a task at a given time. So I always know who is responding to clients right now, who is like the owner of that task, who is responsible for scheduling right now. Oftentimes that can be the same person. There can be a lot of overlap. I don't want you to feel like you need to have like one person who only does scheduling, one person who only does meet and greets. Like I'm a huge fan of having multiple people trained in multiple tasks and roles. But around this size, the volume gets to the place where we really need to clarify who is doing what, when, and how are they doing it. The who, what, when, where a little bit, but y'all know this is kind of a unique business model in its location disbursement. But we really want to get more clarity and structure into the admin team. The good news is you will have, as long as your numbers and your labor costs specifically are set up to be healthy, more to invest into your team structure. I say that as a good news, bad news thing though. It is going to be really tempting and really easy in this window of time to not have a ton of clarity on what you can afford to spend on admin and to over leverage yourself there. So we do want to get really thoughtful about hours that we're giving. That's less for risk in 200 to 300,000 because you've probably been running so lean and so focused on making sure you can take home enough, which you should be, that you probably have been a little more cautious on your investment of admin hours. Like, okay, I'm going to do this because I know I need to, but I'm not going to like just throw a lot at it. At 300 to 500,000, there's more of a risk you will do that. I just want to be totally honest. You will have revenue numbers you've never seen before. It's going to feel like a lot of money, and it's very easy for a lot of that to just kind of like go out the back door into admin costs. So we do want to be really thoughtful here. While also you're going to need to invest in more support for the business to keep growing. And it's going to feel like a catch-22. And it is, to be totally honest. Like it's a bit of a chicken and an egg scenario. And our goal is to just navigate it as best we can rather than it being this like black or white decision, because it's really not. You're going to have to invest if you want to keep growing. Systems can get you further for sure. And also this is a labor heavy business model. So that is what it is. Okay, so we have our team and structure considerations. That's number one. Number two, there's a pretty big risk at this point in key functions of the business that they might get kind of bottlenecked around the owner. An example I'd like to give is client onboarding. Now, I work with a lot of businesses that are not willing or comfortable to give client onboarding to a staff member. I respectfully disagree. I believe that this is an area where we really need to be lining up and training support for you if quick growth is the goal. And that's a big caveat. I work with some companies where they're like, I want slow and steady growth. I want quality over quantity. And if it takes me 5 years longer to hit the revenue point it could have otherwise, I'm cool with that trade. If that's a trade you want to make, I'm not saying it's for sure going to be that time frame, but if that is a trade you want to make, I have less concerns about you kind of throttling client onboarding around your availability. If you are looking for speed in growth, having the ability for client onboarding to grow in volume proportionate to the success of your marketing and to the size of your revenue is going to be critical. And the problem is when something is reliant on your time and your availability rather than a system, it's always going to have constraints on it. And client onboarding is not an area I'd recommend putting a lot of constraints. That's really going to be tied to, again, growth, revenue, speed of growth and revenue. What I don't agree with, I will always respect, but what I don't agree with is a belief that I've seen some company owners hold, which is I can't give this to anyone else. That can't be successfully done. I have to keep this. That is, I believe, fully untrue. If you choose to, we just need to live with the consequences of that choice, which is your lead flow. You can't take new clients if you take a personal vacation or if you're sick, the implications of that on lead flow, the volume constraints that are just going to be built into the system since nobody else can do it and you do not have unlimited time. Those are just choices that we'll have to make if you choose to keep it. But this revenue size is where you're going to start seeing that friction from my experience. All right, this one I think is going to be an interesting one for y'all. The 300 to 500,000 is where I have seen a particular risk of burnout for business owners in our industry. Now, you are at risk of burnout far before 300,000. If you have been in any particular season for long enough, you probably have either battled that at a various point or been at risk for it at a various point. Like, this is not an easy road. I will say that all day, every day. Business owners have the utmost respect from me because this is not easy. You are showing up every day into something that is hard and hard to do and very unforgiving at times and very difficult to manufacture or break. What I have found is that somewhere in the 300 to 500,000 range, it's not uncommon that a business owner who has been putting in the work for quite a while finally gets some of that margin back. They kind of get their head above water. They get themselves out of the day to day, like not just out of the field work, but out of the like immediate administrative whirlwind of the work as well. And there's a bit of a risk of it all catching up. And then all of a sudden, it's like, I don't have motivation to do anything. It's like they finally get a break and then it all hits them. So that's a bit of a tricky season to navigate. I'll give a couple thoughts to that. I'm not going to talk too much about burnout here, other than I think it's really important that if you get into a significant season of burnout, you figure out how to truly take that break. There's some other considerations you're going to want to think through as well of like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? But I am a big believer that if your body tells you you need to take some time off, you need to take some time off. Because typically by the time our bodies tell us that, it's been a while coming. But burnout I have seen as a risk in this window particularly. And all of this is kind of wrapped around our fourth and final descriptor of this window, which is this is a window of revenue in your business where I have seen referrals really start to accelerate. Because you've just hit this volume in your local community of the amount of people that know about you and know about who you are. It just accelerates. You just have more surface area across more people across your community. And that can start to snowball on itself, which is amazing. You've worked so hard for that good brand reputation. You have worked so hard for who you're known for in the community, which is the same thing as brand reputation, but say it twice. So you want these leads, especially when it's your clients sending you good leads. It's like, oh gosh, I love this client. I want to take whoever they know. I'm sure they're amazing. And it can feel like it is starting to accelerate really, really quickly. Once that starts happening, like this huge acceleration point, that can feel overwhelming and hard to navigate. Especially because you just have so many people at this point. And also there are so many needs of the business to keep the structure, so many needs around like building that structure as you go. Okay, biggest risks of this window that will keep you stuck in it. So the first one, y'all, if you're not here yet, you may not believe me when I say it. There is going to be an uncomfortableness that comes for you of stepping away from the noise. So right now, if you're not in the field and you don't have like full-time admin or people who are watching the schedule all the time, you probably have this posture to your business where you're almost kind of like playing goalie all the time, where it's like, oop, incoming message, boom. Okay, got that done. Oop, incoming schedule request, wham. And you kind of get addicted to the influx of information and noise. And what I have seen can happen is when the owner steps one layer higher out of the business and puts somebody kind of in the middle instead to deal with all that incoming noise, which you have to do at a certain volume if you want to keep growing, they can get really uncomfortable. You can start to feel kind of disconnected from the business, disconnected from the clients, disconnected from your team, and there is a risk that you will reinsert yourself. Whether that means you'll just be watching over somebody's shoulder all the time, or you'll kind of trick yourself into, well, I can do that and work on the business. Like I can do both. It's not that bad. I can do it. I don't need them. You do. You have to be able to have uninterrupted time to focus on growing your business. If you are always at the mercy of a client message, always at the mercy of a phone call, you will never be able to pull yourself out enough to work on getting ahead. One really common ask, I don't get this as much with DogCo as I used to, but I occasionally get companies who are like, it's really hard to commit to working with you because all of your calls are during the day. I need you to do calls after hours for this to work for me due to the business and how busy it is. Don't forget, I was there too. I really do get it. Part of what changed for me in the relationship to my business is I started working with a professional business coach, and the time of day he could offer me was 12 p.m. noon. And if you're in the dog walking world, you know that is pretty much the worst hour of time for someone to say that you want to work with and you're paying really good money to work with, to say, this is my only availability. And that was such a gift to me because it forced me to figure out how to get out of it enough that I could commit to that hour of time. And I want to be that applied pressure for my clients as well, because I know how badly they need it. They need the structure, they need the systems to be able to get out of the noise, to focus on growing. And sometimes until you have something that you really want that's going to force that change, we're not going to do it. In part because it makes us uncomfortable. We're actually like fighting against ourselves there. And also in part because it's hard. So sometimes we need that kind of reinforcement, that carrot that, well, I've made a commitment. I'm going to have to figure out how to do that. Okay, so that's the first one. There's this discomfort in stepping away. You're not stepping away from the business, but you're stepping into a new role, and that can feel uncomfortable. Okay, so number two, second biggest risk is going to be a decline in client retention due to all the changes, all the structuring, restructuring, in part due to you stepping away, but not because you doing that was wrong, because we didn't have the systems in place to continue nurturing and connecting to clients. So maybe when you were really inside your business, inside all the communication, you were doing a lot of like non-scalable communication touch points, which isn't a bad thing. I don't want you to stop doing that. But maybe, if you haven't seen a client in a while, you're reaching out to check in on them. Hey, we miss you. How are you doing? Like, can we get you on the schedule? What we want to do is figure out what you're doing now that's working so that we can build a system around it for other people to do it before you step out. We don't just want to leave a giant hole behind. And also, you still need to step out. So there's a tension there for sure. And if we're not really thoughtful about it, clients can kind of get caught in the crosswind. It's like, well, I'm stepping out. There wasn't a system to replace me. All these people are new. There's not a lot of structure. Everybody's doing the same thing. There's just like chaos. There's not a clear owner. Clients can kind of start to quietly fall out the back of the business. And y'all, I'm telling you, the real money in this business model is in client retention. It's less so in new client acquisition. New client acquisition is hugely important, but it's mostly important because it is the needed first step for retention. Retention is really the golden goose here. And I didn't understand that as deeply when I had my business as I do now that I work with so many companies and get to look, so deeply at their revenue models. As an example for you, when a client onboards, say you're a dog walking company, your average walk is $30. That may mean your immediate earning opportunity from a client is maybe $100. Say they book 3 walks, $90. That's good. I am never going to minimize $90. And over the course of the year, if they continue spending that weekly, that's huge. Gosh, y'all, mental math is not my strong suit, but that's at least $4,500, if not $5,000. It's somewhere in that ballpark. That's a sizable client. I know many businesses outside of the pet care industry that would be highly motivated by a $5,000 a year client. But that comes from learning how to nurture clients long-term, how to make them feel valued, and how to keep showing up and engaging and earning their business. And when we do major changes, which we have to make, we can't avoid making them because then we stop growing anyways. But when we're looking at these changes for the benefit of growth, we have to be really thoughtful, specifically on client retention. If you are going to measure one thing in your business, measure the retention of your clients, specifically your templated dog walking clients. How long do they stay, and how can I influence that number? Just your little quick tip for today. Okay, third biggest risk in 300,000, 500,000 is going to be turnover at the admin and manager level. So 3 different scenarios you may see happen here, and these are pretty quick. Number 1, there may not be enough structure. So as you're growing, changing, trying things, it can feel really chaotic, so you might lose people due to that. Number 2, you may lose people due to no fault of your own, but they became a key man risk. And so that's really detrimental to the business. Again, that's where they were talented. So the business kind of grew around them. It grew around their skill set. Nothing got documented, nothing got systematized, and then they leave. And it kind of starts the business all the way back at ground zero at whatever their role was, which we really do not want. And then the third thing that can happen in the admin manager turnover is sometimes you have to force an exit if it is somebody that has not grown with the business in their skill set. This happened to me with 2 different managers that I had. It was a really painful experience because at that point I'll speak to this at some point, not about them specifically, but at that point in my understanding of being a business owner, I really believed that I could cheerlead people into success and behavior changes. I didn't realize that cheerleading has to also have accountability and real consequence, because otherwise we're just hyping people up and it's not helpful. It's not real. It's not the reality of what they're going to have to do to actually keep their job, which is to do what the business needs. So anyways, that'll be a whole other podcast episode, but this is a window of time that you may have to initiate admin and manager turnover because people just haven't grown their skill set as the business has grown. And that's going to hold you back. That's going to be a risk at every level higher than this as well. But I have found that this window, this 300 to 500,000, tends to be this kind of quick acceleration point where that can feel really clear really quickly. I think in large part because you're having to build so many of the systems in this window. So it can feel really, really difficult. Okay, now that we understand the problem, what do we do about it? So 3 solutions I would love to offer you at the end of today's podcast. Number 1, we want to re-envision what your role is to the business. So going back to this kind of risk area of where you might get stuck, which is going to be feeling uncomfortable, getting further away from the day-to-day noise. We need to re-envision your role to the business, which is you are a strategist and a resource allocator rather than an operator inside of the business. So this is a window where it's really important that you kind of step into that true business owner hat. My job is to empower other people to do work and for me to steward the business as a whole. Which you need time and you need to have these core functions covered so that you can do that. So we want to re-envision your role. There's a book I'd recommend. E-Myth Revisited is really excellent. It talks about what your relationship is to the business depending on the season of the business, because it'll shift and grow and change. And I think this is a particular inflection point. Number 2, we want to focus on structuring core systems. So we don't want to get fancy with it. We want to talk about what are the core things that have to happen for the business for health and success. We need client onboarding. We need employee onboarding. We need an employee training program. We need employee management systems. How do we write people up? How do we discipline people? What's a fireable offense here? We need to have these core pieces in place before we start looking at all the other all the other ideas that we want to do. I talked last week about the dilution of focus. Just so you know, that's a risk at every area of your business. And that's a risk here as well. It's you'll see new opportunities, you'll see new things you want to do. And instead, you need to have the discipline to focus on building the core systems. And depending on who you are, you may enjoy that or you may not. I work with some people who have beautiful operational minds, and they actually really enjoy getting to this part of the business growth because they can focus on systems and structure and SOPs, and there's kind of enough in the engine of the business. They can take a step back from all the focus on growth and marketing. I was the exact opposite, which is kind of funny now because I put so much emphasis on SOPs and wrote so many of them, but it was because I saw how important they were, not because I enjoyed it. Actually, if I could spend all day long marketing and all day long teaching and doing content and putting together resources and not focused on structuring all day, every day, that's the easiest trade. And you got to do it. And so this may be a season you enjoy. It may be a season like me where I had to say, it does not matter how I feel about it. The business needs it. and I have to learn how to do it. Now, there's some strategic ways you can move through this season if you are not as inclined or just for efficiency's standpoint. So one thing I would do is I would write in to every admin role, they would help co-write their SOPs. They would edit their SOPs. They would add things if they felt like they had suggestions to improve their role. And that was really helpful. It also gave me a lot of accountability on making sure they got done. So there's some things we can try here, but we have to focus on structuring those core systems. And then finally, big emphasis on client experience and retention. I want you tracking retention. I want you tracking specifically retention and value of templated midday dog walks, that recurring bread and butter revenue. Now, if that really isn't part of your model, I get it. There's so many other things we can track relative to client retention. If it is, though, that's really the client we want to hyper focus on because that day in, day out revenue is just huge. So in this window, specific emphasis on client experience, client retention, and that is just going to have this compounding effect on the business through this tier that's actually going to help you accelerate past 500,000 much more quickly because the revenue model is building on itself. And speaking of 500,000, next week's episode is going to be 500,000 to 750,000. So I hope you're excited because I know I am. Have a great one, everyone.